This video is brought to you by Squarespace. By 1986, the unthinkable had happened. Paul McCartney was fighting to stay relevant. His pop credibility had taken a serious hit after the failure of Give My Regards to Broad Street, and the musical world around him had changed. MTV ruled pop culture. The sound was slicker, the drums louder, and the charts belonged to a younger generation. At 43, McCartney was in good shape. A vegetarian, a jogger, living quietly with Linda on their Sussex farm. He looked healthy, but creatively he was restless. For the first time perhaps, he seemed caught between worlds. Not the eager young Beatle, not yet the elder statesman of pop. So Paul set out to reinvent himself for this new age. The result was Press to Play, a sleek, modern and utterly divisive album that tried to prove that he could still compete with the decade he once helped to define. I'm Andrew from Parlogram, and in this video we're diving deep into this much maligned record, how it was made, how it was received, and why, nearly 40 years later, it might be chance to give Press to Play another chance. After Broad Street, McCartney wanted a clean break. Gone were the old Wings holdovers, and in came a new team of collaborators. The most important was Eric Stewart from 10cc, a man who knew his way around both a studio and a hook. Together, McCartney and Stewart wrote most of the album, songs like Press, Footprints, Move Over Busker, and However Absurd. Working for months at Paul's new Sussex studio, Hog Hill Mill, they wrote side by side, their demos revealing real chemistry. McCartney's melodic instinct blending with Stewart's studio precision. But the partnership was short-lived. When the album failed commercially, their friendship cooled. Stewart said later that after the sessions, the phone just stopped ringing. To give the record its modern sheen, Paul brought in Hugh Padgham, then one of the hottest producers in pop. He'd shaped the sound of the decade with The Police, Genesis and Phil Collins, defining that trademark mix of huge drums, bright reverb and digital polish. Padgham's approach was a bold move for McCartney. He pushed for tougher textures, processed drums and a harder edge. But not everyone gelled. Padgham later described Paul as restless, never satisfied, where every take could lead to 5 more just to try something else. Still, he had huge respect for him, and when Paul asked if they should hire a session bassist, Padgham told him, "You're one of the best bass players in the world." Around them was an all-star cast: Phil Collins and Pete Townsend on Angry, Carlos Alomar, Bowie's guitarist, on Press, and Jerry Marotta on drums. It was a serious lineup, but not a band. Paul, surrounded by machines and professionals, was the sound of collaboration without camaraderie. Recording began in early 1985. Paul's new studio was state-of-the-art, filled with digital recorders, sequences, and early samplers. Initially, he loved the freedom. Tracks like Talk More Talk and Pretty Little Head grew out of spontaneous jams with Stewart and Marotta, layers of voices, loops, and rhythmic textures that felt new and exciting. But as sessions dragged on, enthusiasm gave way to uncertainty. McCartney's natural warmth and melodic touch were being buried beneath technology. Padgham once joked that he'd had a nightmare where Press to Play was so overproduced it ruined both of their careers. He told Paul about it. They laughed, but it wasn't far from the truth. When the album was finally finished, after nearly a year of tinkering, it sounded immaculate, but oddly impersonal. And that brings us to the music itself. Let's start with the 3 songs released as singles in the UK. The lead single, Press, was meant to be McCartney's big comeback, a slice of carefree synth pop for the MTV generation. Built on a drum machine and a bright bouncing synth bass, it was catchy, breezy and very Paul. To promote it, he did something completely unexpected. He took the tube. The promo video perfectly captured the spirit of the campaign. McCartney, the People's Beatle, back among the public. Filmed on June the 16th, Paul spent hours riding the London Underground on the Jubilee line between Charing Cross and Swiss Cottage, miming along to the track and chatting with commuters. Though as one newspaper dryly noted, no one seemed to notice. One passenger, model Susie Sylvie, later said, "I sat next to him and suddenly he got up and started singing to me. Then he said, 'You'll be in my video.' She only realised what was happening when she noticed the cameras filming." The song itself was McCartney's 37th single and was released 2 months before Press to Play. Like much of his mid-80s output, it came in a confusing number of versions. The first UK 7-inch featured the Hugh Padgham mix, running about 4 minutes 20, or actually 3:55 if you timed it, before being replaced 1 week later with a shorter Bevans and Forward video edit. The 12-inch added extra remixes and 2 extra tracks, Hand Glide and It's Not True, while a limited 10-inch edition, just 6,000 copies, came in a circular fold-out sleeve, revealing portraits of Paul. But critics weren't feeling the warmth. It was open season on McCartney, and press made for an easy target. The NME called him the richest man in the country, making a record of stunningly indifferent quality. Perhaps, they wrote, he should stick to writing about money and sheep. While another reviewer accused him of constipating himself in an effort to manage the perfect pop orchestra. And Melody Maker finished the job by saying he left his pop perception on the tube somewhere, dubbing him the Mother Hubbard of pop. Still, press has its charms, and in its way it captures exactly what McCartney was trying to do, reconnect with the public, press the flesh and press play on a new chapter. But the response said less about the song and more about how the press saw him in 1986, not as a creative force, but as a comfortable relic from another era. The single peaked to number 25 in the UK and number 21 in the US. Respectable, but far below what McCartney had hoped. If Press was Paul's attempt to sound modern and approachable, Pretty Little Head was exactly the opposite. Dense, abstract and defiantly uncommercial. Running this channel, I see more and more musicians, artists and collectors wanting to build their own online space, somewhere to showcase their work, tell their story and maybe even sell a few things along the way. And if I was setting one up today, I'd use Squarespace. What I really like about Squarespace is how you can make a site that looks professional without needing any technical know-how. Their cutting-edge design tools and templates make it easy to create something that actually reflects your style, whether that's sleek or modern or vintage and analog. And now, with their Blueprint AI website builder, you can get a personalized site layout, design palette, and even sample content in just a few minutes. It's remarkably intuitive. Squarespace also gives you proper SEO tools built in. It automatically adds things like meta descriptions and sitemaps, so you're easier to find. And for creators, they've made it simple to sell content or membership directly from your site. Perfect if you've got music, videos, or behind-the-scenes material you'd like to share with supporters. So if you're ready to bring your next creative project online, head on over to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/parlogram to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
1986.
Dark, moody and full of processed vocals and tribal percussion, it sounded more like Peter Gabriel than Paul McCartney. He wrote it with Eric Stewart, and together they created something strange and hypnotic, a kind of psychedelic jungle dream. The single came in multiple versions, and in true mid-80s McCartney fashion, it was confusing. The 7-inch featured a shorter remix by Larry Alexander, clocking in at 3 minutes 50, while the 12-inch offered a longer mix, running almost 7 minutes. The B-side, Right Away, another McCartney-Stewart song, wasn't even on the vinyl edition of Press to Play, only on the CD, leading to the unusual credit of From the Album on one side and From the CD on the other. A video was filmed, though it barely featured Paul himself. Shot in October 1986, it was scripted as a narrative piece, which began with the end of the Beatles' She's Leaving Home, with McCartney appearing only briefly in a cameo. A strange choice for what was already his most left-field single in years. The 12-inch also included an alternate remix of Angry, slightly extended from the album version. A limited cassette single, his first ever, was even issued a few weeks later, but it didn't help. Released on November 2nd, 1986, Pretty Little Head stalled at number 76 in the UK, dropping out after just 1 week. The NME summed it up with a mix of amusement and faint praise. This hive of activity finds Paul at odds to whether he is a rocker or a funker, but he ends up crooning over the top of all this techno backbeat and going some of the way towards a Gracelands type of sound. Drum machines in depth, all the trimmings, not a big hit. It wasn't, but it was one of McCartney's most daring singles. Eerie, atmospheric, and full of ideas, Pretty Little Head proved that even when the world wasn't listening, Paul was still willing to take risks. The final single from Press to Play was Only Love Remains, a classic McCartney piano ballad that felt like a breath of familiar air after the experiments of Pretty Little Head. It's lush, sentimental, and beautifully sung, though in the middle of an album full of sequences and processed vocals, it almost sounded like it belonged to another record entirely. The single version was remixed by Jim Boyer, running just a few seconds longer than the album cut. As with his earlier singles, the B-side came only from the CD edition, Tough on a Tightrope, meaning once again, one side read from the album and the other from the CD. A special double-pack edition was also released, pairing Only Love Remains with a free copy of Mull of Kintyre in a stickered PVC sleeve, a nostalgic nod to past glories that probably said more than it meant to. The 12-inch featured longer remixes. Tough on a Tightrope was stretched to over 7 minutes by Julian Mendelssohn, while the extra track Talk More Talk was remixed by McCartney and John Jacobs to nearly 6. A video was filmed at Pinewood Studios on November the 19th, directed as a gentle romantic vignette, starring the great Scottish actor Gordon Jackson. Released in early December 1986, Only Love Remains entered the UK charts at number 39 and peaked 1 week later at number 34. Still, it's a beautiful song, and in retrospect, a fittingly tender farewell to one of the most curious and misunderstood chapters in McCartney's career. In the US, Capitol chose Stranglehold as the lead single instead. A slick, mid-tempo rocker with clean guitars and some tasty brass, it failed to chart, proving that America wasn't any more interested than Britain. Its B-side, Angry, is actually more interesting, with Phil Collins and Pete Townsend guesting. It was meant to sound raw and aggressive, but the final mix smoothed off its edges. Even Collins later complained that his drums were buried. But beyond the singles, there are moments of real brilliance on this album. Written in minutes, Footprints is haunting and is one of the album's hidden gems. Stewart's influence is clear here. With its stark lyric about loneliness and age, it has a real Eleanor Rigby vibe. Good Times Coming, Feel the Sun is 2 songs in one, nostalgic summer memories segueing into optimism. Built up around chopped-up dialogue samples and pulsing electronic textures, Talk More Talk is one of the strangest tracks in his entire catalogue. Paul described it as a sound collage, inspired by conversations overheard in the studio. Fragments of voices, laughter, and nonsense lines stitched into rhythm. It's playful, unsettling, and surprisingly ahead of its time. A moment when Paul genuinely embraced the possibilities of digital recording, rather than fighting against them. Then there's Move Over Busker, one of the strangest and most playful moments on the record. Originally titled Move Over Buster, it's McCartney in full tongue-in-cheek mode. Name-checking Mae West, Errol Flynn and Jack the Ripper, in a song that sounds like Elvis Costello meets 10cc. And however absurd, the finale is wonderfully weird. Whimsical lyrics, dramatic arrangement, pure McCartney eccentricity. Across the album, you can hear him trying everything: nostalgia, modernity, humour, abstraction, sometimes in the same song. It's ambitious, but restless. Press to Play was released on August 25th, 1986, and a week later in the US on the 29th. But despite heavy promotion and McCartney's name on the cover, it struggled to make an impact. But before you hear a note, the cover sends you in completely the wrong direction. A glamorous relic with little to do with the music inside. A soft sepia portrait of Paul and Linda, gazing into the distance like 1930s film stars. It was shot by George Hurrell, the legendary Hollywood photographer who'd once captured Clark Gable and Greta Garbo. It's a beautiful image, but an odd one. In an age of synths, drum machines and shoulder pads, it feels nostalgic, romantic, entirely out of step with 1986. And in a way, that's the perfect metaphor for Press to Play, a record that wanted to be the future, but couldn't quite let go of the past. In Britain, it entered the charts at number 8, but quickly slid down, spending only 5 weeks in the top 75. In America, it peaked at number 30 on the Billboard 200, respectable, but disappointing for a Beatle. In the UK, there were actually 2 different versions of the album in circulation. The first 45,000 copies featured a remix of Press by Burt Bevans and Steve Forward, but later pressings reverted to the original Hugh Padgham mix. The sleeves were identical, so the only way you could tell which one you had was by the matrix number etched in the runout groove. The Bevans Forward version carries PCSD 103 B-7-1-1, while the later Padgham version reads PCSD 103B-1U-1-2. 3 songs appeared only on the CD, not the vinyl. Right Away, It's Not True, and Tough on a Tightrope. Each shows a different side of the project. Right Away is pure 10cc, bright horns, R&B shuffle, and a wink of humour. It's Not True is tougher, a punchy rebuttal to the tabloid gossip with one of his best mid-80s vocals. Tough on a Tightrope is perhaps the standout, a moody melodic cut that blends the experimental and classical sides of McCartney better than much of the album proper. For collectors, they're essential listening, and proof that even his B-sides and bonus tracks often hid some of his strongest ideas. When it arrived in the summer of 1986, the British press sharpened their pencils and their sarcasm. Not everyone was so cynical. The Daily Mirror, writing before the album's release, confidently predicted it would be better than anything he's done for years. Paul is back on his old gutsy form. But to the music papers, McCartney wasn't the adventurous pop craftsman he thought he was. He was a fading star, struggling to keep up with the decade he once helped to define. And the reviews were brutal. The Beat magazine likened him to a grotesque Tory minister on the election trail, adding that if the record were a lamppost, no dog would bother to against it. Eleanor Levy in Record Mirror despaired that anyone still hoping for some magic of yesteryear was destined for a lifetime of disappointment if Press to Play is anything to go by. She dismissed Move Over Busker as a horrible title, and Angry as clever wimp rock. Still, she admitted to liking Press for its jerky idiot charm and detected signs of life in the comatose superstar body. Rare, precious moments, she sighed. One day, Paul. One day. The NME noted that Press to Play had thumbs aloft moments, praising Footprints and Press as flashes of his old melodic brilliance. To younger critics raised on punk and new wave, McCartney represented the establishment, safe, comfortable, unshakable, middle-aged. Even when he tried to sound modern with Hugh Padgham's glossy production, the attempt was met not with respect, but ridicule. The press had decided that Paul McCartney couldn't win, and in 1986, he didn't. Yet looking back now, those headlines feel almost quaint. The man mocked as the Mother Hubbard of pop went on to outlast nearly every one of his critics. The supposed comatose superstar would soon find his spark again with Flowers in the Dirt, embark on his first world tour in a decade, and by the 2000s be hailed as a living national treasure. It's hard not to smile at the irony, because while the press of 1986 thought Press to Play was proof that McCartney's story was over, in reality it was just another verse in a song that's still playing nearly 40 years later. In hindsight, Press to Play was a necessary stumble, the sound of McCartney testing the limits, learning where his strengths really lay, and preparing himself for renewal. Nearly 40 years later, Press to Play remains one of McCartney's most divisive albums. Some see it as a failed experiment, others as a misunderstood step in his evolution. But listen now, and it's clear what he was reaching for: relevance, reinvention, and risk. He didn't always get it right, but he learned a lot trying. And without Press to Play, we might have never had the McCartney who emerged at the end of the decade, revitalised, confident, and ready to take on the world again. This is an album that deserves a second listen, if only to hear a great songwriter pushing against his own boundaries. It's not the sound of 1986, it's the sound of an artist refusing to play it safe. I'd love to know what you think. Do you see this album as an overlooked gem or a creative misstep? Do let me and everyone else know in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive, why not give us a like and a sub, and come back next time for some more stories about the Beatles and beyond. But that's it for this one, so I'll say bye for now, and thanks for watching.
Instruments, half talked, half baked ideas.